Hey friends, it's Laurie. I'm so happy you stopped by. Today I'm making a skeleton and a ghost sitting on a swing, along with a creepy welcome Halloween wreath. I used mostly Dollar Tree supplies, and as always, I hope you enjoy crafting with me. So let's get busy. Getting started, I'm using a plastic skeleton from the Dollar Tree, and it measures 18 inches long. You can leave yours natural. I'm going to brighten mine up just a bit by using some white spray paint. With my skeleton dry, I'm now using some black acrylic paint, and I'm filling in the eyes and the nose. I'm making a really simple dress for my skeleton, and I'm using a leftover piece of black creepy cloth from the Dollar Tree. I placed it over my skeleton, and the nice thing about this creepy cloth is you can make a hole just about anywhere, so I opened up a small hole and placed it over its head. I then cut off the extra on the back. I'm now using some of my red acrylic paint, and I'm painting her nails. For me, the easiest way to do this was to actually use the end of the paintbrush, and then I just dabbed on the red paint. Because it is a skeleton, she doesn't have lips, but I did use my red colored pencil, and it just kind of outlined where they normally would be. To give my skeleton some hair, I'm using some of the white cotton nautical rope from the Dollar Tree. I'm unraveling one end, and when I do, it turns into 3 sections. I have long hair, so I thought I would give my skeleton long hair, and I'm unraveling about 12 inches. I cut my first 3 pieces of rope, then I unraveled another 12 inches and cut those, so I ended up with 6. I want to give my hair a little color, so I'm painting the strands with this golden brown acrylic paint. I'm not being super fussy as I'm painting it. I'm just kind of adding it on here and there. And when I was done with the top side, I did flip it over and painted the bottom. With the hair dry, I'm now attaching it by running some hot glue along the top of the skeleton's head. I'm then adding on one section of my painted hair. With that in place, I continued adding on the hot glue and attaching the strands towards the back of the head. You can always leave her hair as is, but I'm going to fluff mine out a bit by unraveling all the individual strands. There was an open area on the back of her head where I didn't add any hair, and by doing this, it fills in the open space. To give her just a bit of a creep factor, I'm going to use one of these plastic spiders from the Dollar Tree, and they came off one of their picks. I used my glue gun and added a small amount to the top of her head and then attached on the spider. It kind of reminded me of a vintage hat, so I had some of the legs hang over her forehead. The skeleton's feet aren't stationary, so to keep them facing forward, I'm adding some hot glue onto the ankles. I'm now moving on to the knees, and I need them to bend backwards so that she looks like she's sitting on a swing. So I just kind of bent them back enough so that they didn't snap, and then I added some hot glue to the back and held them in place until it cooled. For the hands, I bent them back and forth at the wrist, and they did kind of snap a bit on the outside, but they stayed tightly attached to the arm. For my skeleton swing, I'm using one of the wooden decor signs. You can find these in the craft department at the Dollar Tree. I removed the hanger, and I'm going to be using the 2 existing holes on one side. It measures 18 inches. I cut mine at 11 and added 2 holes on the other end. I made sure all 4 were large enough to accommodate a thick piece of jute, and then I painted it with my purple acrylic paint. Because both sides will be visible, I did paint the top and the bottom. For the ropes on my swing, I'm using 80 inches of a thick jute. I cut 2 40-inch pieces in half, and I have all 4 ends even. You'll need some type of hanger for your swing, and I'm just using an old key ring that I had on hand. I'm placing the 2 loops at the end of my jute through the ring, then placing the 4 ends through that loop and pulling it tightly. You can always leave them natural, but because it's Halloween, I'm going to paint mine with some bright orange acrylic paint. I found the easiest way to paint it is to place some of my orange acrylic paint into a small plastic bag. I then place in the jute and the ring, close the bag, and squish it all together. There'll be a small amount of paint left in the bag, but that's pretty much what you'd be washing off your paintbrush. When the jute was covered in paint, I just kind of dumped it out of the bag and straightened it out and let it dry. Attaching the swing together is super easy. I'm placing the outside piece of jute through the front hole and tying a knot on the bottom. I'm now placing my inside piece of jute through the back hole and tying a knot. I'm now adding the next inside piece of the jute in the back hole and my last piece in the front hole. When I was done, I used my scissors and I cut off the extra ends of jute that were hanging from each knot. As a back brace for my skeleton, I'm using 4 of the tumbling tower blocks from the Dollar Tree, and I painted them with the same purple acrylic paint. I used my glue gun and I stacked one on top of the other. I then added some hot glue and I centered the stack on the back of the swing. I added some hot glue onto the blocks and just below them, and then sat down my skeleton. I placed her hands around the jute hangers and I crossed her legs. Miss Skeleton is now ready for Halloween, and she can hang either indoors or outdoors. I do keep mine out of the wind and the rain. If you're new to my channel, please consider clicking on that little red subscribe button below, leaving me a thumbs up, and to all my returning friends, you know I'm always so happy to see you. To make my skeleton welcome wreath, I'm starting with one of the 14-inch wire wreath forms from the Dollar Tree. I'm wrapping it with 2 packages of gray creepy cloth, and I found these at the Dollar Tree as well. I stretched each piece out lengthwise and then folded it in half. As I was folding it, I did my best to match up the ends, but it's definitely not perfect. I then folded it in half again, and then folded it in half one more time. Now that I'm done, I have 2 long pieces of creepy cloth, thick enough to hide the form. I'm attaching it by first adding some hot glue on one of the supports on the wreath form. I place down the creepy cloth and fold it over one end. To make it easier to wrap, I then cut it in half. I continued adding on hot glue and wrapping all of my creepy cloth around the wreath form. As I was adding it, I did my best to keep the cloth flat and made sure you couldn't see the wire form. I used the gray creepy cloth for my wreath, but if you can't find it or you prefer, they do sell black at the Dollar Tree. For the creepy part of my wreath, I'm using one of the Dollar Tree skeletons. When you open it up, there are a lot of wrinkles in the fabric, so I steamed them out very carefully. The ends are cut straight across, and to make it just a little bit interesting, I used my scissors and I cut them all at an angle. I'm having my skeleton face the wreath, so I want the fabric that's on the front to now be on the back. Very carefully, I'm turning the skeleton's head and hands completely around so that the fabric that was originally on the front is now on the back. To help fill it out, I attached a piece of the creepy cloth to each hand and then snipped off the hanger. I placed the skeleton down on the side of my wreath and I stretched out its arms. I have it exactly where I want it, so now I'm hot gluing it into place. I'm adding a creepy welcome sign to my wreath. This came from a 3-part sign that I found at the Dollar Tree. I want to brighten it up a bit, so I'm painting the letters with my purple acrylic paint. I found its placement on my wreath and then used my hot glue gun to attach it. I'm using 2 stems of flowers from the Dollar Tree. One is black and the other is purple and black. Along with the flowers, they come with black branches, leaves, and 4 sparkly spiders. And I'm removing all of them from the main stems. With everything removed, the first thing I'm going to do is pull apart my purple and black flowers. The purple paint that I used on my welcome sign is a different shade than the purple on my flowers. So after pulling them apart, I'm using some of that same purple acrylic paint and kind of dabbing it on the petals. It only took a short time for them to dry, and now I'm putting them back together. Before I permanently attach my flowers, I always like to find their placement first on the wreath. So I'm placing down the purple and black in the center and the all black on the outside. Happy with their placement, I'm now using my hot glue gun and attaching them. To fill in the open spaces, I'm using the black leaves that came with the flowers. And just like I did with the flowers, I'm first finding their placement. I didn't have any set plan, I just tucked them in wherever I saw an open space. Having them all in place, I then attached them with some hot glue. To give it a bit of a contrast, I'm painting the black branches that came with my flowers with my silver spray paint. Now that they're dry, I'm tucking them randomly around my wreath. And just like the leaves, I don't have any set pattern. I'm just kind of placing them here and there. To hold them all in place, I'm once again using my hot glue gun. I'm using 3 of the sparkly spiders that came with my flowers, and I'm evenly spacing them on the wreath. You guessed it, I then attached them with some hot glue. If you happen to be wondering what happened to the last spider, I painted the body of it with some orange acrylic paint. I then used the back of my paintbrush and I added on some purple dots. To pull the orange and purple color from my welcome sign, I attached the spider to my skeleton's neck. And with that, this Halloween welcome wreath is complete. To make my ghost on a swing, I'm using one of the Dollar Tree's wooden wall shelves. It measures about 15 inches long and 3.5 inches wide. The jute hanger is just a bit too short for the ghost, so I removed it from the shelf. I'm now using my black acrylic paint and I'm painting both sides. The shelf kit comes with a small round metal hanger, and because the jute is too short, I'm going to remove it. To make the hanger for my swing, I cut 2 pieces of heavy jute, both at 104 inches, and then I folded them in half. I made sure those 4 ends matched up together, and now I have a loop at the other end. I'm attaching the jute to the hanger by slipping the loops through the center. I then pulled the ends through the jute loops. I'm painting mine using the same black acrylic paint that I used on the seat. The easiest way for me is to add some of the paint into a plastic bag and then place in my jute. From there, I just start working it around until the jute's completely covered with the black paint. When I'm done, there'll only be a small amount of paint left in the bag, and I figure that's pretty much what you'd wash off of a paintbrush. I then removed it from the bag and let it dry. I'm placing a piece of jute through each hole and making a knot on the bottom. I'm using the jute that came with the shelf kit, but you can always make the holes larger and replace the jute with rope. When I was done, I used my scissors and I cut off that extra piece of jute that was hanging on the end of the knots. To sit on my swing, I'm using one of the Dollar Tree ghosts. It's wrapped up in a package pretty tightly and there's a lot of wrinkles when you remove it, so I did press it out with my iron. Underneath the sheet part of your ghost, you have a styrofoam head and two bendable arms. To help my ghost sit on the swing, I'm using a styrofoam cone from the Dollar Tree. At the bottom of the ghost's head, I used my knife and I carved out a hole. I made it about 2 to 2.5 inches deep and large enough to fit in the end of the cone. When the hole was deep enough, I then added in some hot glue and attached the cone end inside. On the top of the ghost there is a hanger and I just cut mine in half and turned it into a bow. I'm attaching the ghost onto the swing by first centering it in the middle. I'm then wrapping each of the ghost's arms around the jute handles and folding them over so it looks like it's holding on to them. With everything in place, I then added some hot glue under the cone. With that in place, I'm now gathering the fabric in front and I'm using a rubber band. I'm placing it over the fabric and I'm stopping at about 5 to 6 inches from the swing. And then I cut away the rubber band. I'm keeping it gathered together and I'm adding some hot glue on the cone and on the bottom of the swing. I then tucked the gathered fabric up and into the hot glue. I kept pushing the fabric back and forth into the center until I had a small seam. I'm giving my ghost 2 knees and I'm using 4 of the large white pom-poms from the Dollar Tree. I used my glue gun and attached 2 together, so I had 2 sets of 2. I pushed the fabric away from the front of the swing and then added on 2 lines of hot glue. From there, I attached both sets of my pom-poms. With my pom-poms in place, I just flipped over the fabric. My cute ghost on a swing is now ready for Halloween. I'm hanging mine outdoors, but not during a windy or rainy day. Can you believe it? Here we are at the end of the video, and as always, I really hope you enjoyed making these Halloween crafts with me. If you're new to my channel and you're thinking, hey, I'd like to come back and hang out with her again, don't forget to click that little red subscribe button below. If you're looking for more Halloween inspiration, I'll leave you some links to my other videos at the end of this video. I hope you all have an amazing day, stay healthy and safe, and I will see you soon. Bye everybody!